Howdy folks, and welcome back to lesson number 3 here and learning to sight read on the mandolin here at MyBluegrassRomance. My name's Jake, and today we're continuing to look at sight reading specifically in context of our open strings and how to build off from that. So if you haven't seen lesson 1 and 2, I invite you to go back and watch those. Today we're going to look specifically at our A string and our E string, or A strings plural and E strings, those courses. And we're going to learn, from last week we looked at sort of working our way up from the A to the B and from the E to the F. Today we're going to expand that to the next notes along those strings. Again, not looking at accidentals or anything, just natural notes. So notes that don't have like a sharp or a flat associated with them. So if something says like F sharp, that sharp symbol is called an accidental. If, for example, we say B flat, that flat symbol is called an accidental. If we say natural notes, we're talking about like just A, B, C, D, E, F, and G. No sharps or flats. So again, you've got those additional symbols called accidentals, and everything else is just a natural note. There is a natural symbol that you can put on a note in notation to make a note go from an accidental back to a natural, but don't worry about that today. So today, let's look first. I'll bring up some music across the top of the screen. Let's look at this open E string, the F note that's here, and the G note that's played here. So I'll bring that out across the top. We're looking at a time signature here of what's called 2/4. What that means is there's just 2 beats per measure, and a quarter note gets the beat. So that's what the bottom, that 4 means. Like if you had a 1 above it and looked at it and it said 1/4, that would be the type of note that gets a beat in that measure. And there's 2 beats in the measure. So 1 quarter note gets 1 beat, the second quarter note gets the second beat, and then we're on to a new measure. Subdividing that beat would be like turning those quarter notes into eighth notes, at which point you'd count it 1 and 2 and for a measure. But again, today we're just looking at quarter notes. So across the top of the screen, what you're going to see here is, again, an open E. That note is in that 4th space on the staff near the top. The next note you see there on beat 2 is an F. That's played on your first finger right there. And then when we go into the second measure, you'll see a G note, and that's played with your second finger here on the 3rd fret. So if we counted out that whole measure, and I counted you in with 1 and 2 and, it would sound like this: 1 and 2 and 1 and 2 and 1 and 2 and. And that symbol way down here at the end, at the very end of the measure there, that is a quarter note rest. So what that would again notate is you're just not playing anything there. Rests come in different shapes. And we'll look at those as I go, but this one, if it's your first one that you've ever seen, that's called a quarter note rest. It kind of looks like a nose with a little chin underneath it. So now let's look at an exercise. Again, our exercises are going sequentially. So in lesson 1, we had exercise 1 and 2, and exercise 2, we had lesson 3 and 4, and in lesson 3 here, we have exercises 5 and 6. I'm doing that because I'm working out of a violin book and I'm adapting it to the mandolin. And so exercise 5, which is the first in this lesson today, I'm going to bring out across the top here, and you're going to see 4 measures, and the entire exercise is actually 8 measures long, and then those 8 measures are repeated. And so if we just look at the first 4 measures, we've got, you can see in the first measure, you've got an E note on beat 1 and 2. You've got an F note that's on that line. That's on beat 1 and 2 of the second measure. In the third measure, you've got a G note and a G note. And then in the fourth measure, it drops down back to 2 E notes. Now I'll bring up the next 4 measures of this, and you'll see you've got, this is, say measure 5 of the exercise, right? Because it's the 5th measure in the exercise, but it's going to be right here. That is again going to have an F note, and the next measure G, G, and then E, E, end with an E, and at the very end, you've got that quarter note rest again. So I'm going to give you, again, a count-in of 1 and 2 and then we're going to play that exercise. So try to think again, those E's are all going to be open, all the F's are on this first measure, and all those G's are on that third measure, on the first fret and the third fret, right? E open, F first fret, G third fret. And again, it's good to do this nice and slow because you want to internalize these so when you see those notes above that you just immediately put your finger in those places. And that'll come over time by doing these exercises nice and slow. So here we go with exercise 5. 1 and 2 and 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 1 and 2 and. Now I invite you over to my Patreon site. It's patreon.com/MyBluegrassRomance. It's $3 a month, and I've got all sorts of great exercises on there for all sorts of mandolin picking. Bluegrass is what got me into mandolin playing, but I've since gone in all sorts of directions from there. And so that's why I call it My Bluegrass Romance. But it's really devoted to learning mandolin. And on there, what I do with these exercises that we're learning is we try to learn to play them in context of something musical. And so I'm going to give you an example of something you find over there. In this particular exercise, once you've learned how to play that, what we just played pretty steady, I'm going to count in. And again, you're going to play it. I'm going to be playing eighth notes, so you're going to hear me playing a rhythmic, a melody that's a note when you play a note, and then I'm going to play another note where you're not playing, and then we're going to play a note together, and then I'm going to play a note by myself, and then together, and you'll hear like this interplay. So you're playing on beats 1, 2 of each measure, except for that final one, and I'm playing eighth notes under you. So I'm going to count in, and just once you feel comfortable again with that line you just learned, pause the video, learn that, and then come back here, and I'm going to count in, and I'm going to play a line underneath you. And it's going to sound, this is a little duet that we're going to play, and it's going to sound like this. I'll give you 2 measures of counting in. 1 and 2 and 1 and 2 and. So hopefully that sounded like a nice little duet that you played with me there. And again, over at my Patreon, I've got backing tracks for all these and duets like that for all these exercises at varying tempos, so you can kind of work on being musical with these exercises. All right, for the next part of this lesson, we're going to look at the same kind of idea, but instead of playing the E and the F and the G, I'll bring up music across the top here. We're going to be looking at the A string, the B note, which is your first finger on the second fret, and then a C note, which is here with your middle finger on the third fret. And you can see across the top here, your A is sort of the second space from the bottom of the staff. That's your open A. Your B note is the line right above that A note. And the C is sort of that second space down from the top. So if we were to play those 2 measures that you see across the top, I'll count in, they'd sound like this. 1 and 2 and 1 and 2 and 1 and 2 and. All right, so you've got that. Let's bring up the next exercise across the top and look at what we've got here. So I'm bringing up, it's an 8 measure exercise. We're going to look at 4 measures at a time across the top of the screen. So the first measure is going to have an A note and then an A note. The second measure is going to have a B note and a B note. Your third measure's got a C and then a C. And the fourth measure, again, has 2 A notes. one on beat 1, one on beat 2. The second half of this exercise, so measure 5 of the exercise, has a B note and a B note, then a C note, and then you check this out. In the second measure, you've got that C note that I just referred to, and the next note is actually an E note. It's from our other exercise, right? That's this open E up here. So now as we start to sight read and we start to learn notes on single strings, we're going to start to jump to other strings because we've learned those notes as well. So again, you're in measure 5, you're going to have B, B. In measure 6, you're going to go C, E, and then you see on measure 7, you have A, and measure 8, A. So let's play all of this exercise. I'll give you 2 measures. 1 and 2 and 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 1 and 2. So yeah, there's some more sight reading. I hope that, again, you can just kind of take these in little niblets and bites and work your way up to sight reading on the mandolin. There is so much awesome music out there, not just for mandolin, but for violin, because it fits in the exact same range that you can adapt a lot of violin music to the mandolin. And I've definitely been at jams before where people will come in and have an iPad, or at rehearsals. I took part in this mandolin orchestra in Portland, Maine recently, and had a blast. But that was all kind of, some songs were presented in tablature, some we worked on playing by ear, and some were presented with standard notation. So you never know when you're going to run into it, and it's definitely something to help to put in your bag. And you don't have to get great at it. I'm not suggesting you have to learn how to sight read so that you can play at full tempo with music in front of you. What I'm suggesting is that you can use it as a way to learn some cool songs. You know, I've seen, like, people will write originals out sometimes in standard notation, and you have no context of that tune. Maybe you've never heard it, but you've got this little piece of paper, and now you can make music with it. Thanks again for sticking around with me in this lesson here at My Bluegrass Romance. Come on back next week for our next lesson. It's going to be lesson 4 in sight reading, where we look at similar ideas on these low 2 strings, the G and the D.